welcome to another edition of the Chuck and Ruck Show. I'm your host, Ruck. To my left, it's the always wise, the always present, the ever extraordinary Chuck. Chuck, what it do, man?
Yo, what's up with it?
What's going on with you, brother? I see you got the green on today. I see you all piped up, ready. You look ready today. I,
Yeah.
I,
Just because
I,
I got the green on, don't think I'm gonna go with the team you thinking.
I think this one is self-explanatory for today and everything. I think this one is self-explanatory, but we'll get into it. We'll get into it. We'll not waste time here. But as we continue our journey into predictions for divisions for the NFL this year, for this season, let's get into the NFC East, or as some would like to call it, the unfortunate NFC least. Um, Particularly with one that would be the ever so the ever lovely, loathsome New York Football Giants, who uh who probably have seen better days in recent memory. Um Daniel Jones, who in recent memory just does not look good in quite some time. Saquon Barkley, who sits here, who's just coming off a bad injury. Um, the offensive line is not really that well, but I will give the Giants credit because they have themselves a very, very interesting all season, particularly in the draft. I mean, they did draft a Kayvon Thibodeau, and they did draft Evan Neal, who many have said, if it wasn't for if it wasn't who you asked, if you ask certain people about Kayvon Thibodeau, some will say he probably would have been the number one overall pick in the draft. Depends on who you were asked. So he might be a potential steal for them. And then Evan Neal, also depending on who you ask, was probably the best offensive lineman in the entire draft. So kudos, they may have gotten some potential steals out of that draft pick, out of the draft for them. But and then probably the biggest move for them, hiring Brian Dable as the new head coach. But the hiring of Dable was controversial to say the least. Remember the whole musical chair situation with the name Brian, but we'll get into that. That is remained for another story. Chuck, my man,
Yes, sir.
is there any hope for the Giants this year in maybe potentially stealing a wild card, or is five a lucky number for them this year?
Uh, no, I think the playoffs is out of the question this year. Giants, they they just don't have the talent to really compete. Even though this division isn't great, their talent isn't, their talent is subpar. You mentioned Daniel Jones. This is a big year for him because the Giants went out and got Tyrod Taylor. This is a guy that we know can step in and start immediately. He's not great, but if Jones get off to a horrible start, I wouldn't be surprised if Taylor get in there within the first, 4 or 5 games, really. But you like you said, Saquon Barkley. I think it all hinges on him. What Saquon are we going to get? Are we going to get the guy that won Offensive Rookie of the Year that was, tearing the league up? Because if he comes back, they could really, really make some noise in the division. I still don't think they'll be a playoff team, but if Saquon can make some noise, they could definitely at least make it interesting among the teams in the NFC East. You mentioned their draft. What's the guy? Kadarius Tony from Florida. I like him. he's a pretty quick, fast receiver, so it's something to build on for the future. But as far as this year, I got him going, like you said, I got him going 5-12.
Yeah, 5-12 is definitely it's in their limelight, their future. But you mentioned something too about Daniel Jones. This is definitely a make or break year for him. Tyrod Taylor is sitting in the wins for them, and he could definitely be in the wins as the starter to finish out the year. But we also had to remember the Giants have a new general manager and a new head coach. So I would not be surprised by season's end if Daniel Jones is gone and the Giants are looking potentially to go after to be one of the teams that be knocking at the door at CJ Stroud or Bryce Young next year, or I forgot the other potentially the other quarterback that's at Miami, who a certain someone that we may be seeing, by the way, on this show at some point in the near future. You'll get to know him later. I won't say no more, but he's been hyping this guy up. That's in the University of Miami, and he's been talking about how good he is. But all I will say is this: a new regime is there, and with the Giants and everything, and this Daniel Jones is definitely not good on the last legs. There, this is the beginning and the end for Daniel Jones, and 5-12 is definitely it is definitely appearing to be the case for them. Moving right along, moving right along. Let's go into the Washington Commanders, who it's a very intriguing team in my personal opinion. Um, I think the Commanders, they got loads of talent. If you really look at it, they are a very, very talented team. If you really look at it, still got Antonio Gibson, who's a very, in my opinion, is a very underrated running back. Um, they did just resign Terry McLaurin to that contract extension. Um, they did went out and go after Carson Wentz, who, in my opinion, is the biggest question mark on this roster on this football team. Which Carson Wentz exactly are we going to get here? Are we getting the Carson Wentz who, before he got injured in Philadelphia, the season the Eagles went to the Super Bowl, was basically an MVP, or are we getting the Carson Wentz that came back and basically led the league in interceptions and saw him got booted out of the Eagles? Which one are we going to get? If we getting the one that was a basically an MVP candidate, shoot, you may make a case that Washington could very well be a could win that division and could make a potential dark horse run in the playoffs, because I don't care what nobody says. Like, the Commanders still have a very, very talented defensive line on that roster. You got Chase Young, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, and Montez Sweat. That is a very, very talented defensive line on that roster. You still got weapons on the outside. Um, I the only two questions that I still have on that team is Carson Wentz and Riverboat Ron Rivera. I'm not worried about his health factor. That's not the issue with me. The issue I have with Ron is he can have moments of inconsistency when it comes to coaching. Some days you'll look see what he does on coaching wise. You'll think he's one of the most brilliant minds in the NFL. But then there are days you just wonder, like, what in the holy world is he doing out there? So, Chuck, could Washington potentially could you see Washington being a potential dark horse in the NFC, or is the ways of confusion too much to bear?
Well, I want to start out by saying I have a little bit more faith in Carson Wentz than you do. I mean, we all know that. I'm a Carson Wentz fan. He was playing well until the end last year with the Colts, and they shipped him out because they went out and got Matt Ryan, I believe.
Yes, they did.
But yeah, I like Washington. They made some improvements on their offensive line. They got a new what's his name, Andrew Norrell,
Yes,
Trey Turner. So they
yes.
definitely are trying to protect Wentz and give him some time. Like you said, the re-signing of Terry McLaurin. Um, I like their draft as well. They drafted Dotson from Penn State, another good receiver. You know,
Yes.
and they got another running back later in the draft when Robinson from Alabama. He's a pretty good versatile back. I like the Redskins. The biggest question is now, what was that in 2020 Washington? I believe they had like a top 3 defense. Last year their defense was awful. So can they bounce back to that play? If they can get back to being a very good defense, I think Washington can go a long way in this division. Right now, I may be drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit too much with Wentz. I'm gonna say that, but I got him winning. I got him going 11-6.
See, my issue with Wentz is one thing. You don't have forgiveness for me when you sat here and you took that horrible L against Jacksonville last year. That loses all shrouds of you lost all forgiveness for me when you took that L there against Jacksonville. But like I said, Carson Wentz had that's the issue that I have with Carson Wentz. He will have moments where he will sit here and he will look absolutely brilliant. He will look so amazing that he'll look like a top 5 QB. But then there are other moments you just sit here and you just question like, what in the holy mother of F are you doing out there? That's the issue that I have for him. He is amazingly talented, but the other days you just question what are you doing? But that's the issue that's the biggest issue with Washington in general. You just hit the nail on the head. Back in 2020, Washington had a top 3 defense. Biggest part was that defensive line. That defensive line was one of the dominant forces I have seen. They took over games the likes of which I have not seen in a long, long time. And then all of a sudden last year, it's like they no show. Part of the reason I believe was Chase Young was hurt most of the time, but then there was other pieces like Deron Payne. It's like he just no showed. Montez Sweat basically took a step back. The only one that really showed signs of consistency was Jonathan Allen, who got paid for it basically, and deservedly so. But everyone else just basically was hurt or just inconsistency. Um, I'm not sure how the secondary will show up this year, but if that all I know is this, if that defensive line can reenact what they did back in 2020, particularly Chase Young, if he can finally reach his potential and be the dominating edge rusher that I know he's capable of being, I could agree with you. I think 11-6 could potentially be their record. For now, I'm going to go to potentially the safe side and probably say 9-8, possibly 10-7. But that has to be that has to be solely dependent on how that defensive line plays and Carson Wentz if he can show any shroud of consistency. If he can, then Washington not only can get 11 wins, they could probably steal that division. Moving on,
Absolutely.
yes, absolutely indeed. Oh, and you hit another nail in the head too, in Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson is going to be a huge factor for that team this season for them. He is a playmaker by every stretch of the word for that team. because they definitely needed that. Terry McLaurin is a good wideout, but he is only one man. Adding McLaurin to the outside, McLaurin was one man. Adding Jahan Dotson to the outside is going to be a huge, huge factor for them, and that's going to help. But moving right along to the team that a certain someone on First Take loves to say is an accident waiting to happen, and that is the how about them Cowboys? Ugh. The team that everybody loves to hate. Well, outside of pretty much being the most annoying effing owner in professional sports, um, Dallas pretty much is in. Well, Dallas just being Dallas basically this year. I won't get into pretty much the details of everybody Dallas, but let's face it, everybody pretty much knows the Dallas factor here. But there is one thing that I will say that's interesting. Jerry Jones made an interesting comment in regards of about who's going to be the predominant running back factor here, and he basically said that Zeke is going to be the primary running back, which I don't know. If you ask me, I think I have to disagree here because Zeke is up there in age, and I think the primary running back should be Tony Pollard because I think Pollard is younger and he's more explosive at this point than Ezekiel Elliott. Although Elliott is still remarkably talented, I think Pollard is more explosive and can offer you more in your offense versus Ezekiel Elliott at this point. But that's just me. I'll just leave it be. But when it comes to Dallas, we know what they're capable of. We know what we have. You have Dak Prescott, who's one of the better explosive, has one of the best arms in football, incredibly accurate, incredibly talented. CD Lamb is an explosive playmaker by every stretch of the world. Dalton Schultz, their tight end, really emerged as something special for them. But the two big emergence came out of that team last year. That was on the defensive side of the ball. Micah Parsons and Tavon Diggs. If that was two saving grace for that team, it was them on the defensive side of the ball. So, Chuck,
Yes, sir.
is that enough for them? Can they be enough can they officially be two in a row NFC East champions?
Well, I'm gonna say they're not going to win a division because it hasn't been one since 2004, back to back division winners in the NFC East. So I'm gonna say they're not going to win a division. But one thing Dallas has going for them, they have the second easiest schedule this year in the NFL. So they definitely have that going for them. You know, they made some nice additions and Malik Hooker, James Washington, and linebacker Dante Fowler. I like those pickups.
Mm.
But they have their question marks. You mentioned the big one. The biggest is like what can they do with Zeke? Like what does he have left? I mean, with the emergence of Pollard, you might not need as much from Zeke to really impact the game, just a big run here or there where he doesn't need, to carry the ball 28, 30 times. But, what does he have left? And the other question mark, which kind of is a question mark right now, but I think he kind of proved himself is CD Lamb. I want to see him emerge as really a top 5 receiver. If he can do that, Dallas can go a long way because I always like Dak. But if CD Lamb, if he can really come out and establish his dominance as being a top receiver in this league, I think Dallas can go a long way. But with all that being said, I got Dallas right now finishing at 10-7.
Okay. So you mentioned everything, that's a fair point, but you didn't mention the biggest question mark on that team. It's not CeeDee Lamb. It's not Ezekiel Elliott. The biggest question mark on that team is Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
That is the biggest question mark on that football team. Because if we watched that game against the 49ers and we saw how undisciplined and unprepared how Dallas looked in that game, there was a lot of red flags about how Mike McCartney had that team prepared for in that game. I cannot imagine Jerry Jones could let that could let Mike McCartney potentially slide another year for him to have his football team look like that again for another playoff year. I just can't imagine that. I just cannot. Because the team that Jerry has now is really talented and ready to go. I just can't imagine Jerry will allow Mike McCarthy's team to look like that. I just can't imagine that. And there are, and then there are just still the team just does look unprepared at times throughout the season,
and
and it's
and don't forget about a certain coach that's out lurking, looking for a
yes,
job.
yes, absolutely. And that's the biggest thing of it all too. Like as soon as the bottom falls out for Mike McCarthy, you know he's going to rush to that phone and he's going to give Sean Payton that call. And he's going to give Sean Payton whatever the hell he wants. He wants Sean Payton more than anything, but he can't do it now because well, McCarthy's there. But I can assure you, it won't be. I can almost guarantee you right now, by any chance, if Dallas does not win, at least if Dallas does not at least get to maybe an NFC Championship game, I don't see Mike McCarthy coming back after this season. I just don't. And I can see Jerry Jones giving Sean Payton pretty much whatever the holy heck he wants. 10 almost the same type of contract that the Raiders gave John Gruden, possibly more, just to get Sean Payton there.
Now, one thing, like Sean Payton, he'll be a great pickup for just about 80% of the league. 80% of the league will love him.
I agree.
But the one problem Dallas has is Jerry Jones.
Oh, absolutely.
Would he step back and let Peyton run things? Because you know Jerry just loved to sprinkle his little flavoring on the team. Will he step back and allow this guy to really run the team? That's the only question I got as far as hiring him.
If he didn't let Bill Parcells coach his football team, you really think he'll let Sean Payton coach his team? That answers your question right there. I mean, come on now. Let's go. Come on now, man. That answers your question right there. But last but not least, we go to the team that I personally feel is going to win this division. And I think that had the best offseason of this entire division, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles. And yeah, they had themselves a very, very nice, strong offseason. From drafting my personal favorite, which I was hoping we would have gotten it in Jordan Davis, from even making the trade to going after AJ Brown. So now Jalen Hurts potentially has no excuses at this point to sit here and to be the true franchise QB on that roster. You now have Devonta Smith, you now have AJ Brown, and you now have Miles Sanders as your main offensive weapons. You have the heir apparent to Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis. You still have Darius Slay in your secondary. You have no excuses for that football team for the Eagles now. I personally believe that they can do whatever they can to potentially take that division, and I think they're going to. I think I think Jalen Hurts has slowly but surely shown the signs necessary to make this to take that next step. Injuries has been his issue. Injuries has been part of his problem. Um, I still have my questions about Nick Sirianni, their head coach, but not as much. Chuck, do you think I'm crazy?
Um, I think they have a nice roster. I like the addition of AJ Brown. You know, I think he's a game changer. You know, I think he's going to be a nice weapon for Hurts. But I don't know. I'm just not a big believer in Jalen Hurts yet, man. I don't know. I just need to see more. Maybe mid-season, he may convince me and they may turn me into a true believer in the Philadelphia Eagles. But I just think Jalen Hurts is too big of a question mark to really say that they're going to really make noise in the division. But other than that, you know, they got pieces all around. Like you said, Jordan Davis, man, this guy's a freak athlete, fast, good hands, like possibly win, you know, rookie of the year on the defensive side. You know, that's a great pickup. You know, I'd also like the pickup of Kazir White, the linebacker. I think that was a good move. They got a well built team, but you know, I just like I said, I'm just not sold on Hurts as of yet. I need to see more. So right now, I got them finishing at 9-8.
I actually believe they can finish 11-6. I think they can finish 11-6, and I believe they can take that division. I think this is the year where we could truly see the best out of Jalen Hurts. And I think this will be his true calling because I think everything is in place now for him where he could truly grow and he could truly leap and take that next step. Like the only thing I could potentially have my concerns with is like I said, he is injury prone. He is injury prone and everything. And he at times when he does play, he does take too many unnecessary risks when he plays. Like he takes too many hits where he shouldn't. Um his decision making isn't bad. It's just he takes too many hits when he shouldn't have. Also, I'm not still 100% in trust mode on Devonta Smith, but I think Devonta Smith can definitely now won't have to be the major factor of the offense now, particularly in the passing game, because you have that now in AJ Brown. AJ Brown can be that main factor, and Devonta Smith could just be that number two and he could just start taking. He could just be free now. And remember, they still have Miles Sanders, who was a do everything back and can get you scrimmage yards off a dime, basically. So I actually do like the Eagles, and I think they could get 11 wins and they could easily steal that division. Like I said, the issue is it's just with Jalen Hurts, but I think this is the year where we could truly see the best out of Jalen Hurts this year, and he's gonna show the NFC what he's truly capable of.
Yeah, you know, like I said, man, they have a very well built roster. You know, they did some good moves this offseason, you know, all around. But, you know, I just need to see more from Hurts, man, because, you know, I want to believe that they really can take a hold of that division because of Jalen Hurts, if he can come out and play like you feel he can, you know, I think they can win that division, probably going away. But, you know, I'm just gonna step back a little bit. I'm a little bit more conservative, what I think he is capable of right this moment, as far as what I've seen. But hopefully he can step up and he can prove me wrong and all the other doubters because he got the weapons now. So if he can build that chemistry, him and AJ Brown, and hey man, this team could definitely win this division.
And the most important thing about him is that he has the talent as well. He definitely has the talent that he can prove it as well. Um, and with that, that's all the time that we have for this edition of the Chuck and Ruck Show. Tune in next time as we go over. Um, well, at one point, Aaron's Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, the NFC North, but something tells me this may not be the end. This may not be Mr. Rogers' neighborhood for too long.
Ooh.
Am I crazy to say that?
Well, I wouldn't call you crazy, but hey, like your boy said, he's a bad man.
We'll just have to find out and see. We'll just have to find out and see. But until then, tune in next time to the Chuck and Russ Show. Later, Gators.